Mr. President, and I rise to make my contribution in this debate and also to follow on from the Leader of Government Business. On behalf of the opposition, welcome Senator Reid, and just to say to him that he has some very high shoes to fill, because he's replacing a senator which no less than 4-inch stilettos, but definitely but she definitely made some useful contributions, and I am so sorry that she's no longer here with us, but you definitely have some high heels to fill, and we look forward to your contributions in this place. But the matter before us at this time is the Social Empowerment Agency, which we have been waiting for in this chamber for quite some time, in that we passed the legislation with the rights of persons with disabilities, and really that legislation could not function without the passage of this legislation in this place and the other place to form the Social Empowerment Agency. Now, Mr. President, we supported the legislation for the rights of persons with disabilities because we do recognize, and the Democratic Labour Party has championed the rights of persons with disabilities and also elevated those persons, because we do recognize that they need to have a prominent position within our country. We had the first persons with disabilities being the President of the Senate, and she did that job admirably, and up to this day she is still regarded not only here in Barbados but regionally and internationally because of her advocacy for the rights of persons with disabilities. And so we will never have an issue supporting such legislation, because we do recognize the importance of maintaining that social safety net within this country. It is something that we spoke about a lot in terms of, regardless of how much economic growth that you have, if you do not have the social safety net in place, you will find yourself in a country that is filled with chaos and confusion. And you will not be in a position to enjoy the benefits of that economic growth and to enjoy the benefits of that wealth when a large segment of your population are not necessarily feeling that economic growth. They don't feel it in their pocket. They don't see it on their tables when they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They don't see it in the houses in which they're living. They don't see it as they grow old and become elderly and more dependent, in terms of having that assurance that a state is there, or assistance is there, or community is there that is willing to offer them that level of assistance. So all of these are things that we need to make right within this country and continue on that path in terms of our social development, that no Barbadian is left behind, regardless of their situation, whether it be a physical or a mental or a physical disability or any other disability, or in a case of poverty, must always be able to bring those persons along. We would have had, as the Democratic Labour Party, the IC Bridge program, which I thought was a very instrumental program, in that it not just, it looked at intergenerational poverty, and it was a model to bring, with the goal, the vision, the aim, to bring families out of intergenerational poverty, recognizing that they needed access to proper education, that they needed access to proper health care, that they needed access to proper jobs. And you provided all of these services. You treated the entire family as one, provided a holistic basis for that family. So you didn't just look at the individual who turned up to the welfare department asking for assistance to send their children to school and giving them a check which they could then use to purchase school uniform or food, but you went in and provided the social services for that family. Because at the end of the day, every single mother, every single father, grandparent wants to make sure that their family are well taken care of. And it's not just to be properly fed, but make sure that you have access to a job that you can provide to your family. So it is not about being in a position of promoting dependency, but you are promoting self-reliance and independence. And that is how our social and our welfare system needs to be repositioned within this country. And we also need a paradigm shift, which I will come to later, in terms of how do we think or classify those persons who need welfare assistance. So all of these things are necessary. You are promoting self-reliance and independence and getting families out of generational poverty. Education is important. Access to proper housing is important. Access to proper sanitation is important. Access to jobs are important. Skills training, and even if you can get to the stage of entrepreneurship, that is important, because we want for our families to be in a position that 10, 15 years after benefiting from assistance from the state, that you are in a better position to provide for your grandchildren, and that they do not have to travel the same road and go through the same hardship which the mother came through. This is what we need for our state and to envision in terms of our country, in terms of how we are going to develop our people and provide that necessary social safety net that everybody in Barbados feels or believes that if I am in a crisis situation, that there is assistance out there for me and I don't have to beg for it. And I also strongly believe that we need to come to the end of those days where we have to depend on a politician to initiate that assistance. It is the role of the politicians to put the policy in place for it. But I do not think that a family should have to go and beg or line up at a constituency office or wait till a politician comes out of parliament to beg them, or even put it in the media for assistance. As long as there is a need, you should be able to freely go to the welfare officer responsible for the community, the constituency, and get that assistance. And I come now to the point about how we classify persons who require assistance in this country. I think that we have to recognize that gone are the days where persons requiring assistance only live in chattel houses. Gone are those days. We have had, not just in Barbados, but it was a pandemic, COVID. And as a result, I'm just using that as an example. As a result of COVID, during those years, 2021, 22, when you heard of the deaths, you heard husbands dying, fathers dying. So let's just use as an example, imagine a family that lost a mother and a father, and it is just 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds who are left to continue. That family would need assistance. And even though the mother and father was able to build a nice bungalow in the developed areas, they're no longer there. And the children are not yet at the stage where they can properly manage to finance that house, to pay the utilities, to continue to pay the mortgage if there is one, or even to continue with the renovations to the house which the mother and father may have been doing. So you may very well find yourself as a social worker in the child care board, or coming up later, the Rural Development and Urban Development Commission, receiving a request for assistance to repair a roof on a lovely wall house. But because of circumstances, the family just does not have the means at this time in order to go to the bank to get a loan to repair that roof. But they recognize that come June, July, when the hurricane season starts, that every single day that they will have to live in fear if an announcement is made that a tropical depression or storm is likely to pass Barbados, because they know that if it passes, that roof can blow off and they will be without a house. And I would think it is better for a government to fix that house before it blows down than to wait until it blows down to fix it. And that is the way in which we need to take the shift that we need to make in our access to social development. So gone are the days where you can go to a house and just because it has a guard wall and it is a nice 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom bungalow with 2 bathrooms, that the person's living in that house, you can say to them, you do not qualify for welfare assistance. Going back to COVID again, the period of time for which a number of persons were without jobs because the entire country was shut down. Those who worked in the hotels would have lost their jobs. There were a number of persons who would have moved into their house 6 months before COVID, and then to be told 6 months after COVID by the bank, because you cannot continue, you cannot make your mortgage payments, someone from the bank is there to repossess the house. And now you have all of these people who now have to make a fresh start in life. They did not plan for it, and all of these circumstances need to be considered in terms of how we go about making access to assistance. You also have another situation, the number of persons who have taken ill, possibly as a result of post-COVID related diseases. You have a number of persons in Barbados who are now turning up to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on dialysis. And as a result of that, they're no longer in a capacity to work. So they have to depend on invalidity benefits coming from government, which they are entitled to and qualify for. Those invalidity benefits do not in any way match the salary which the individual would have received when they were working. So in a situation, and it's not, you have a number of disabilities, because you could end up in that situation as a result of a traffic accident, or you could end up in that situation as a result of a fall on your workplace. And then you have to get invalidity benefits which are at a fraction of what your actual salary was before. And you are the main breadwinner for your family. You had a housewife. And you are the main breadwinner for your family. Can you imagine the amount of hardship and emotional distress that those people go through when they still have to pay a mortgage, they still have to pay their utility bills, they still have to provide food for the household, they may have children at school, they still have to provide for those children, but they're receiving a fraction of what they were making when they were out in gainful employment. And you have to readjust your life to that, and sometimes you end up in a situation where the utility companies, they still want the full amount for their utility bills. The supermarkets, still, you can't carry out the items from the supermarket on a promissory note. You still have to pay the full amount. So these are persons who, even though they may be receiving the invalidity benefit, may still have some claim to being able to access welfare, to assist with the utility bills, to assist with the children going to school, to assist with the purchase of food. It is not that the persons are being greedy, but it is just that your circumstances have changed so drastically, a situation completely out of your control, and yes, many of them cut and contrive to make it work, but they're still under a lot of emotional stress because the utility bill comes at the end of every month. The grocery bills, you still have to put groceries on the table. So if we can offer them some assistance in allowing these people to have a top-up, or we can also go the route as well as increasing the amount of the percentage of invalidity benefits which are paid. These are things that can be done as well. Or giving them access to some welfare assistance for a period of time to help, or when they face a crisis, to help them through that situation. All of these are things that we need to consider if we really want Barbados to be considered as a developed nation who puts its people first, and as a nation who has a social safety net in place that regardless from birth to the grave, the citizens are taken care of. And I think that we should be able to afford it. We are a high tax jurisdiction. We are taxed for everything. The VAT, the government has not seen it fit to reduce from the 17.5% to the 15% to give Barbadians an ease. They have increased the contributions which will come from the social security, from NAS, to provide for the resilience fund. So now instead of paying 0.1%, you have to pay 0.25% for that. So the point that I'm making, and we still have the gas tax there, we still have the foreign exchange tax there. We tax Barbadians at every single stage from cradle to the grave. So to provide that you can give back to persons when they need it most, I don't see that is a difficulty. That should be part of our social safety net, ensuring that all Barbadians are provided for. So we can continue with that. And I'm hoping that this government will see it fit, that they will make those provisions available. So we need to have greater education and also change the policies within through this social empowerment agency, that the welfare officers would know, the social workers would know that when they go to make their assessments, you cannot be operating on the 1980s model, but you have to take into consideration that the demographics of Barbados has changed over the years, and even persons who consider themselves to be middle class may find themselves in a situation for a few months, because we know that many Barbadians in middle-class communities, they say live paycheck to paycheck. And if you lose your job for 6 months, you are in trouble in terms of being able to pay your mortgage and being able to pay your utilities bills. So as a country that taxes Barbadians so highly, be in a position to offer them assistance, and don't let it create a legacy of Barbadians investing in housing and then to have the banks repossess them a couple of months after they've become comfortable, and then you have to start all over fresh. Especially in a situation too, where this government is known for providing employment for persons, but providing that employment with no security in terms of not paying the national insurance contributions for those persons, and then placing them in an unfortunate situation where they do not have security of tenure, so therefore they cannot go to take a job letter courts to get a bed to bring out. They can't take a letter to the bank to get or the credit union to get a loan to do minor repairs on the household. All of these are things that we need to consider puts holes in that social safety net which we are trying to create. So I would advise the government that they need to consider their role in this and fix that situation quickly, because if you hire someone on a temporary basis within government for a year or 6 months, government should ensure that they pay the national insurance for that individual so that they can contribute and earn credits towards their pension. And if you are on a contract for 3 years, allow the persons to have the benefit of that security of tenure, because you might still be able to go someplace with that letter, 3-year contract, and be able to get a short-term loan or get a hire purchase agreement that you can do something for yourself. All of these are things that erode the social safety net within this country. So we can't, on one hand, you can't on one hand pat yourself on the back for passing the legislation, but then on the other hand, you're doing things that just as much erode the social safety net and the enfranchisement of people. There's also another critical area which we need to consider, again with housing, especially for the women. There is a phenomenon out there where a number of women who are head of households, and after they reach a certain age, after they pass their 40s, find themselves in a position where they cannot go to a bank to get a loan to even do repairs or get a mortgage for their house. It's more so over the age of 50, because obviously it is believed that they're soon coming to the pensionable age, and therefore they may not be in a capacity to repair that, to repay the loan. A majority of these women are in that situation because you may very well live in the house on your own, or you still have minor children who may still be at school or not yet in a capacity to assist. This is where the National Assistance Board comes in terms of offering assistance. And I believe that at one point the National Assistance Board had a program in terms of offering housing, especially for the elderly, and repairing houses for the elderly. We need to see more of that happening across this country. There are many elderly persons, in particular women, who are living in housing conditions that are not adequate. Gone are the days where Barbadians should still have to be using a pit toilet, even though that does not necessarily fall on these ministries, but these are the assistance that should be granted to persons in terms of making sure that those sanitary conveniences are available. And I am suggesting to this government that a national survey be done, and where you find situations where Barbadians are still living in such situation, that the Social Empowerment Agency, as is their remit to provide this information to the government, should go through the communities and a list of all of those persons, and government should take on board that as a project to relieve those persons of pit toilets in the rural areas.
On a point of order, Mr. President, sir, I think the Honourable Senator is misleading the House in suggesting that there's no such policy or program exists. In fact, he is addressing it as if it's new discovery, a new suggestion. The government has a pit toilet eradication program. There have been extensive social surveys to identify all of the persons across Barbados, and it's not just in rural Barbados, but in urban Barbados as well, to determine those who have pit toilets and need to have them replaced. And government has embarked on and is going very well on its pit toilet eradication program. So I wouldn't want the Honourable Senator to think that he's making this as a new suggestion that has never occurred in the history of Barbados, and this is something new to be started. It may never have been done previously under the Democratic Labour Party, but it is very, very much a policy of the Barbados Labour Party that is ongoing and is having extremely beneficial impacts. In fact, sir, when the sewage projects were done, that was one of the things that disclosed that there were pit toilets in urban Barbados, in places where you would not think, and that was one of the triggers for the policy and the program. I know that this has been a long point of order, sir, but I think that the public and the Senator deserve to know. I didn't think that he wanted to continue to mislead the public and himself.
Thank you, Honourable Senator Thompson. Please continue, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think I was misleading myself or the public because I made it clear that there was such a program in place. What I'm suggesting, as Senator Cummings did say, that we need to use this debate in terms of envisioning how best we can change the delivery of social care services in Barbados to move it from what it was before to get it to where it would be that all Barbadians can feel that it is working for them. And I would like to, through you, Mr. President, inform the Honorable Deputy President that under the functions of the agency, Part 5F, to advise the Minister on social protection mechanisms, the delivery of social assistance to vulnerable persons, and any matter which the Minister may refer to it for advice. So my point was that I was hoping that through this agency that there are still pit toilets in Barbados. I know that it is done through the Ministry of Health. But my point was that through this, there are allocations through the Ministry of Health. My point was through this agency that the National Assistance Board and other agencies do offer assistance in terms of assistance to housing. Take on such a project and a time period by a certain time that all of them would be eradicated in Barbados. It will be a good economic stimulus to Barbadians in construction, which is desperately needed at this time, a good economic stimulus in construction, a project that could be taken on, and you will bring some sense of dignity to a number of people in Barbados who can benefit from it. That is the point which I was making. I was not saying that it wasn't done before or coming up with this idea that is something brand new, but I'm just saying that I would hope that through this agency that it will be so empowered that after a period of time that this would no longer be a case, or no politician can come to the House or when they are in their constituency canvassing have to face a constituent who has to be living with a pit toilet. That is the point which
on a point of order, sir, just to
point of order.
Again, misleading the chamber, sir, just to assure the honourable senator that this was not a side program of the Ministry of Health. The pit toilet eradication program, and you note the word eradication, which speaks directly to the point that the senator was attempting to make, that there is no such eradication program in place. The pit toilet eradication program was not executed as any sideline of the Ministry of Health. It was a strategic imperative of the Urban and Rural Development Commissions. It was something that they did, and in fact, the people who carried out the works were small contractors, and they did have the benefit of gaining revenues and profits from their work, of helping their families, of stimulating certain sectors of the economy. So the almost senator had not been making a bad speech, but I cannot let the record be contaminated by ignorance, sir.
And I think once I know that you mean it in the classical sense, lacking knowledge in a specific matter, I think though that you may want to substitute another word so that readers of the record in the future may not think that we're trespassing on the rules of the House. That's how I'm saying the word.
So just indeed to correct the record, I do not mean the word ignorance in the pejorative sense in which Barbadians use it. I did use it in the classic English sense, in its classic English meaning of not having information. So no offense at all is intended to the senator. And in fact, I did say that up to that point, he had not been making a bad speech.
Please pass on, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will not deliberate any further with someone who, had the wisdom to put a dump in a protected area. So I will press on with my contribution, Mr. President. But the point was still made We need to elevate our thinking in the way how we deliver social services to this country and to its people. Mr. President, it brings me to my next point with regard to this legislation. And, you know, I do believe that legislation such as this, which is very important, should have the opportunity to have wholesome debate within this chamber. And also that members should have the time in which to scrutinize the legislation. Because our role here is not just to simply pass the legislation, but also to educate the members of the public about the contents of the legislation, how it would actually work and how it would actually function and how it would benefit them. So we should really be treating such a consequential matter with a very wholesome debate where we can freely share on our thinking of how the Social Empowerment Agency can work and how it can benefit this nation. I, in principle, support the legislation, but with a level of intrepidation, Mr. President, I have to consider how I give that support, given the practice of this government in recent times, especially on the departure of former Senator Haynes, who lobbied for the Civic Center, and then we were told by the senior minister that it was not a done deal, and then this was on the 18th of February, we were told it was not a done deal, and by the 8th of March, we were pretty much told, regardless of how much one of his parade, I probably can't say, regardless of how, strike that from the record, sir.
Thank you.
Regardless of how much you march across Barbados and march by Voltown, it done happen already, and we will proceed. So, because of how important this amalgamation is to the security of tenure of the persons who worked within the legacy agency, I have to be cautious with the way how I give support to this bill. So I want to come to situations, because I know it has happened in the past, where we know that the government is rushing to amalgamate the agency to satisfy the terms and agreement under the IMF program.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order.
Point of order.
Mr. President, the Honourable Senator, I know it's not intentional, it's misleading the chamber. I think that I outlined in my presentation, this has been a 2-year-long process of mapping out the amalgamation. The Honourable Senator, therefore, cannot reasonably be describing a 2-year amalgamation. In fact, inclusive, that is outside of COVID, because the process started, and I mentioned it started under the previous minister with responsibility, so there is no description about this process that can be rushed, Mr. President, and I beg to move that as not something that should be kept into the record.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. His opinion, and it doesn't have to, an opinion doesn't have to be correct, but an opinion is allowable. Please press on, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Even though the senator was quick to point out that it was a 2-year program, they have been in an IMF program since 2018. And we know that the part of the IMF program is also to reduce the number of statutory corporations and also to reduce the employment levels. So we have seen, this is not the first time.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order.
Yes, Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, when you say to reduce the employment levels, that's a dangerous thing to say. I think we have been very clear in all of the amalgamations that this government has undertaken that there have been no job losses. And we have made that clear, and I can't let that stand on the record either, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummins. Senator Worrell, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. There have been no job losses yet, but that does not mean that in the future there will not be job losses. And I want to pay some attention. You could also ask the DMC persons the same thing. Has that agreement been finalized? I would want, Mr. President, to pay some attention to some matters within the bill that I thought, some matters within the bill that I thought may need some further consideration. Now, yes, the new agency will be responsible for the work of about 4 or so legacy agencies, including the Child Care Board, the National Disabilities Unit, the National Assistance Board, and the Welfare Department. And whereas I have no issue with the amalgamation of those agencies from the perspective that it would allow for a better management of social care delivery, where you will have these agencies which operated in silos before, now coming together and being able to work together for better efficiency in terms of delivery of services. Because you do have a situation where a number of these agencies may have been duplicating the same services. So this, I think, is a good thing in terms of being able to pull all of them together, and Barbadians will have one area which they can go to in terms of accessing the social care needs which they require. But the point that I was getting to, in terms of when we do have these amalgamations, you often have issues in terms of the rights and the conditions of service of the employees of the legacy agency in terms of going into these new statutory organizations. And yes, I do recognize that the legislation does point out that the pension benefits and all of these things will be preserved. And I do hope that this was clearly discussed and supported by the unions which represent all of those agencies, because I know some of them will be represented by the Barbados Workers Union, some will be represented by the NUPW, and some could be represented by Unity Workers Union. And I do hope that you have consensus and you have had the discussions with the workers and the unions, and everyone is on board with this merger and will be able to go forward. And 10 years, 15 years from now, you're not hearing that persons are denied of pension benefits or any rights. And I also think we create an environment where we form these new companies. We maintain the rights of the legacy employees, but then we have almost different rights for the new employees who are onboarded in the new company. That creates problems, and it creates friction, and it creates a different standard within the work environment. And it does not normally end well for the organization, because you have two different sets of employees in the organization. The new employees who are coming in, who are operating on the different terms and conditions from the legacy employees who are there. And it creates challenge for the HR within those organizations and for the managers. If you have a system which is working properly, maintain the same level of benefits for all the employees, so that you do not have these two tiers of employees working in the organization doing the same job. So this is something that we need to consider, for the government to consider, and as a country going forward. Now, in terms of the definitions, the legislation speaks to an executive director, which I believe will represent the empowerment agency on the board of directors. But then it also speaks to the possibility of allowing the heads of the various divisions which came under this entity to also function as directors. This, to me, creates some sort of confusion. Then you also have the definition of the director of the board. So I'm wondering if it would not have been better to put a definition for the put an actual definition for the director in, and the directors of the various divisions. And then when you look at the personal emoluments, not all the directors are paid at the same salary, because you have the chief welfare officer, for instance, whose salary is different from the director of the National Disabilities Unit. So the question I would want to ask this government is, does the title and the role of Chief Welfare Officer continues under this dispensation, or can we expect that the Chief Welfare Officer will become the Executive Director? How would we go about choosing amongst these different directors who already exist? You have the Chief Welfare Officer, the Director of the Child Care Board, Director of the National Disabilities Unit, the Director of the National Assistance Board, I think it is. How do we go about determining which of these officers will function in the capacity of the Executive Director of this amalgamated agency? And also, will we be maintaining these legacy titles for some period of time in terms of the Chief Welfare Officer, Director of the Child Care Board? How will we match those up now in this new dispensation where you have persons who operate at different salary scales? So these are things that I would like to hear the working out. If you had met with the unions already, I believe that all of those things would have been discussed in the union discussion. So it would be good to hear from the government how they plan to work out those matters. Now, going into the body of the legislation, with regard to the Appeals Committee, this is Section 31. For the purpose of hearings and determining appeals on the Section 30, the Minister shall annually, after consultation with the Board, appoint such number of appeals committees as may be prescribed. To me, annually seems like far too frequent for an appeals committee. We cannot at this stage anticipate the amount of work that the committee might have, but if it is annual and a matter was referred to the committee in December and the year changes maybe January of every year, that committee may not be able to continue to deal with that matter because annually the term will change. So maybe you might want to consider giving the appeal committee more time to function. Probably a 2-year term or even a 3-year term is possible, because I don't see it as anything that would do any harm to the legislation and any harm to the functioning of the organization. But if the committee serves for too short a period of time and then has to await at the end of their term the approval from the minister to continue, it could slow down the process of having appeals heard and having matters dealt with. So just give yourself a little bit more leg room and possibly extend the terms of the appeal committee to 2 years or even 3 years to fall in line with the term of the board as well. Now, I believe that it clearly stated within the legislation that the Pensions Act, no provision shall be made for the payment of any pensions, gratuity, or any like benefits of any persons employed by the agency without the prior approval in writing of the minister. This is for new employees of the agency. Now, again, this is different from the statutory benefits of the persons who would have worked in the legacy agency. So are we saying that the new employees of the agency would have to have that approval from the minister for benefits such as pensions being paid on their behalf? I think that it should be included, and you do not want to create this two-tier system of employment where some employees know that they are entitled to a pension and gratuity, and then the other set of employees are not entitled to such. Everybody should work under the same terms and conditions. This is within the legislation. So, Mr. President, like I said at the outset, We need to, with this new agency, see a change in the delivery of social services across this country. It is imperative that we need to improve the safety net in Barbados. There are far too many young people falling, in the wrong direction. There are far too many families who are out there unable to send school their children. You encounter families, children can't go to school some days of the week because the mother does not have lunch money for the children or bus fare for the children, or there's nothing in the house to feed the children. We encounter far too many of those situations in Barbados. And as a country that is taxing Barbadians so highly, we should be in a better position to give more to the persons who need it. And I'm hoping that through this agency, we will see a better delivery of social care services across Barbados. We would have a recognition that the qualification standard has been changed. So don't just look for the persons within the chattel house, or if you come from a developed community, you can no longer say to persons because of where you live, you do not qualify. Because of the type of house you live in, you do not qualify. Because you have a flat screen television mounted on the wall, you do not qualify. Those should not be criteria set to determine whether persons are going through actual hardship. Because there are many people who suffer emotional torment because they don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage at the end of the month. They don't know how they're going to pay their utility bill at the end of the month. They don't know if they will have enough left to go into the supermarket and bring out sufficient food to give their children a proper meal on Sunday. And if persons do fall into that situation, these social workers are properly qualified to do an assessment to know who are the ones who are taking advantage of the system and know the ones who are who definitely need it. We definitely need to have more social workers, not only within the welfare department, but hopefully within the school system and within the communities as well, so that social workers no longer have to be burdened. And the policy of taking persons off of welfare after 6 months without a proper review, and in a situation where the circumstance has not changed, that needs to be adjusted as well. Do the proper evaluation before that 6 months period has ended, and if you find that the circumstance has not improved, allow the individual to continue to get that assistance. We need to be a more caring and humane society overall and show consideration for our people. And it is only through that we can eradicate a number of the social challenges which are currently impacting on this country. It is not something to be done by one government, but both administrations need to take, both political parties, every single government that comes to office in Barbados need to have that as the center of its manifesto and its philosophy, that you will take care of the most vulnerable in your country. Because if the vulnerable are suffering, it does not matter how much economic growth that you have in the country, the ones at the higher end will somehow feel threatened as well. So with those few words, Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Worrell.